So welcome, everyone. Looks like we have one guest is Connie Van Egan, and Tom is here from MMC TV, and we have the 4 members so far. So great. Welcome, everyone. Any adjustments to the agenda? Our agenda basically is going to look quite familiar to everyone. Half the time, we're going to try to talk about the Jolina Court situation, and the other half, the flood hazard overlay district situation. We've got them in a different order, though, this time. They're in the reversed order from last time, so that's just to keep it interesting. Any changes or adjustments or anything anybody wants to do with that?
Just a note, today is my wedding anniversary, and
Oh, happy anniversary.
thank you. I would like to exit the meeting after the Jolina Court discussion, assuming that we have a quorum at that point, which I realize we wouldn't have now unless, so I guess it's dependent on additional members joining.
Yes. Well, we will hopefully have Allison here and you can break out the champagne.
Thank you.
So, yes. All right. I don't see any adjustments to the agenda, so we will proceed with the posted agenda. Any public comment? That would be Connie on anything not on the agenda. Connie, I assume, is here for the agenda.
Yes, I am. Thanks for asking.
Great. Thank you. All right. So no other guests, so no other comments. So next up is reviewing the minutes of 8/21/24 meeting. Anybody have any additions or corrections or changes they would like to make to the meeting minutes of 8/21?
No.
Okay. Not seeing any additions, changes, or corrections. We will accept those minutes into the record as written and proceed to our agenda item number 5, which is to review the Jolina Court District zoning amendments, the draft number 6, and the new residential bonus draft, which accompanies it, which is being called section 615. So just a really brief recap of where we are in this project. At our last meeting, there seemed to be some kind of agreement that those of us who were committed to just increasing the density would compromise from that position, as long as those who were in favor of inclusionary zoning, which is mandated affordable housing, would compromise that position. That seemed to be. Hi, Allison. Welcome.
It's a trek up those stairs.
Yeah. We're glad you're here. All right, Chris, looks like Allison has arrived, so you might be saved.
Great.
Hi. Oh, yeah.
Everyone's here.
We have people on.
Yep. So that was where I felt ended up last time. Was the compromise that we were going to make was we were going to have optional density. So Buttermilk could increase their density if they elected to participate in the density bonus scheme and put in the kind of units that would earn them more market rate units. So that's where we ended up. Any issues about that? So what we want to talk about today is the exact particulars of the density bonus scheme. I think we're pretty much all in agreement. We're going to remove the commercial requirement on the first floor in building number 2, and any building that's not facing Bridge Street. And we're going to allow for increased density as long as it is according to the density bonus plan. So
could you just restate increased density over what?
over the current density, which is 31 units in building 2 for a total of 45 units that their original master plan had allowed for. So 31 units, so a greater density than that. And what has so far been suggested is that they could go to a total maximum density, which would be their 31 units plus whatever number of units would take them to a total density of 24 units per acre from 15 units per acre. So that's the plan to work on today, the exact language that we might have in such a density bonus scheme. So a couple of other notes about the density bonus scheme. Where I started from in terms of how the density bonuses would be awarded is I did look at the fact that the state has mandated an affordable housing development if it has 20% of the final number of units that are affordable. That's 1/5 of the units. Then that's what they're calling an affordable housing development, if 1/5 of the units are affordable, true affordable. So I just took that 1/5 number and I applied it only to the number of new units, because if they were interested in 20%, they would have taken the scheme that the state has mandated. They are not interested in that. So to make a more inviting scheme for them that they actually might think about, I took the 1/5 number of the new units, using the fact that they had submitted the number 45 units in their rental revolving loan application as the number that they were aiming for in building number 2. So 31 they already have, they were aiming for 45. So the difference between those two numbers would be what they could achieve. And if we take 1/5 of the extra new units, then we would get to a much smaller number, obviously, but it's still like 20% of the new group of units. Had to start someplace, and that ended up with being the 4-to-1 for true affordable. So that's the 4-to-1 bonus level, because if you get 4 market units and you have 1 affordable units, that's 1/5 of those units, 1/5 of each new group is affordable. So that's where that 4-to-1 number comes from, in case you're interested in how I got there. We have no idea, obviously, whether it's going to be attractive to the developer or not. And it's going to be very hard to determine that before we put this out there and they tell us whether we already know from the letter that they submitted, they're not really interested in that, but this is what we'll find out.
So just to do the math quickly on this, I mean, I think this makes sense to me, but if they have 31 units now, and this density bonus, as you described, was in place and they went to 45, that would be an additional 14 units. And
Right.
to get there, 3 of them would have to be affordable?
Right, exactly. So to get 14 or 15, if you want to make it nice and mathematically easy, for an additional 15 units, 3 would be affordable, 12 would be market rate, 1/5 affordable. So that was one category that we could offer as a density bonus, the 4-to-1 bonus level. A second level that we had talked about, if you go back a little higher, is the 2-to-1 level where you don't get as many units, but it may not be as burdensome. So you only get 2 additional market rate units. And those are the categories that we talked about of the senior units. I took out the workforce or rent restricted or small units because that didn't seem to be too popular. And also the parking comes under the non-residential bonus category. So that's something that's kind of different from getting units for units. It's a whole, calling it the non-residential bonus category. And, you know, the numbers are the documents that I looked at from Heinsberg. So Heinsberg has a density bonus program, which they're going to probably scrap entirely to just go to the state mandated density bonus, but they also have an inclusionary zoning regulation that is going to have to offer some density bonuses. So I've talked to Alex Weinhagen about that, what the density bonuses are going to be that they're going to offer to the inclusionary zoning. And it's going to be, he says, the state mandated.
Mhm.
So, but they're working with affordable housing developers. So it's kind of a different category.
How does this compare with the state mandates? What we have here that you're
The
suggesting?
state mandate is for a specific kind of development called an affordable housing development,
Oh, okay.
in which 20% of the units are affordable.
Uh-huh.
So that,
Which the 4-to-1 is based on.
which
or-
the 4-to-1 is based on
Okay.
only on a smaller
Much
scale, because
Mhm.
this is not an affordable housing development. It's just some affordable housing units
Okay.
in the confines of a regular market rate
Mhm.
housing development. So, so that's the basics there. Just to go over, stop doing that. Oh, sorry. Let's turn this off.
How rude.
It sounds like
I've got a lot going on at my house right at the moment. So, sorry about that.
So,
So the 4-to-1 bonus level, that's the true affordable housing. The 2-to-1 bonus level is senior or adaptable housing. And I did put in the packet on the, you know, the rough preliminary draft of what that would look like, having worked with Molly Dugan and Cindy Reed at Cathedral Square. But obviously that would have to be further worked out exactly what we were going to call a senior or adaptable unit. It is not an ADA unit. It's got some features of ADA, but some other features as well. So we can talk about that in a minute, but that's the 2-to-1. That's all that remains in the 2-to-1 bonus level, senior housing or adaptable. The public parking, I couldn't find anybody who was doing this. So it's a totally made up number. The creation of 5 parking spaces dedicated to the town for public parking in perpetuity. Or I still put in the leased parking in case we thought that would make it more attractive to the developer, because leased parking for local businesses is also going to take cars off the street out of the public parking and put them in the leased parking. So it will essentially free up public parking. But those numbers are up for grabs, and I couldn't find anybody who was doing that. So there you are. The other things that we would need to still do for a density bonus scheme is to develop the forms and the way it was going to be administrated. What was going to be required exactly, you know, obviously true affordable housing. It's going to have to be reported every time a new tenant takes one of the units. We'd have to know which units are affordable. We'd have to decide if it's in perpetuity or 15 years is the state's mandate. Is not in perpetuity, but the affordable housing development mandate is for only 15 years or whatever the town wants is what it says. So that would be something that we still want to decide. So
Can
what
it be
I,
less than 15 years, but not more? Is that what that is?
no, it can not be less than 15 years. It has to be 15 years
Oh,
or
okay.
greater.
Oh, okay.
15 years on into in perpetuity. So what we could do tonight is we could talk about these things and see what people think about them, what they think about this scheme. Is this the way we want to go? Josie has a letter in the packet which restates their position, which is they just want, you know, some increased density. So opening the conversation here. Hopefully everyone has looked at this and has kind of thought about what would work to move this forward.
Just an observation about regulation design. And this is something that you come across with building codes and other things as well. But when there are multiple channels that when you provide a developer multiple channels to achieve whatever their objective is, in this case, it's increased density, you need to be careful to see the relative difficulty of the various options that are provided and the relative costs, and whether those are, you know, sometimes they are not equivalent intentionally, because you know that there are going to be some parts of town or some districts that one or more of the channels just won't apply to, and so the remaining one is the only one that's available. But in this case, because we're just talking about Jolina Court for now, we're talking about all three of these being available. And so the question becomes, if you were a developer, and let's say we adopted all three of these density options, which one would the developer do? And at least based on a strict cost reading, and I know it's all draft, Virginia, at this point, I think it's much, much cheaper for the developer to do the senior housing option. Simply because it can be done in any unit, probably very small incremental cost, and that's what we would get is just a bunch of senior adapted units, which is a good thing, don't get me wrong, but we wouldn't be making any progress towards the other objectives of affordable housing or parking.
Yeah, well, I mean, my goal was to make any one of these useful if they took that as their whole thing. You know, if they wanted to do that, that seems like, why not? You know, I mean, the 2-to-1 level, you only get 2 market rate units. So you'd have to have, you know, to get 15 more units in total, you'd have to have what?
8 of one or 7 of the other, or
8,
well, not 8, but
8 to 4, yeah,
So
8
if-
to 4. If you had, well, if you
Yeah.
wanted to have 15,
5.
you'd have to have at least 5.
No, I did the
Because-
math on this too, and that's what my statement was based on. So,
The 2-to-1. Yeah.
yeah.
So is that not a good thing? You know, are we not, why do we need to have them do all of these? I don't know that we need to have them do all of these. It seems
Well,
like
no, I mean,
one of these
I thought
would
the
be
point
useful.
was that we were that you know, different members of the committee are championing different approaches, but if the setup is going to be that any developer is going to take the path of least resistance, then there's no point in doing if there's a big disparity between the level of resistance there. The point of having this in there at all is to encourage the outcome that you want, whether it's parking or affordable housing or senior units.
Yeah, well, so we just need to alter the numbers to make them all equivalent if we want to, try to give the opportunity for them to meet any of these needs that we have. So, I'm open to them to changing the numbers. I'm waiting for people to suggest what numbers they think would work, what would be useful.
Well, I think that for to at least be in the right direction, I would flip it for the senior units, not be 2-to-1, but 1-to-2.
Well, yeah, I mean, and do you base that on something or?
Well, I haven't sat
Figure
down and
out.
tried to price out the incremental cost of adding the items that are in the draft list, of what is a senior unit. But I'm sure that, as I was saying before, that incremental cost is less than the cost of parking places and maintaining them, or of having a true affordable unit. At least that's my eyeballing of it. I've not tried to figure that all out, and maybe we should if we really want to do this. But
Yeah.
I think I think it is pretty clear that the cost for the senior unit would be substantially less.
And what would you suggest would be a way to go about finding out what the right number there is?
Well, let's see. So for the senior unit, you probably need to just cost that, first of all, finalize the physical attributes and then price them out. And then do the equivalent for the other two as well. And you can do that for I think it'd be fairly straightforward to do that for the true affordable units, just because it's a limitation on rent, though. Yeah, I guess you just do it straight that way. And then for the parking, I have no idea, because I don't, and this gets to another point that I was going to bring up later, is there's nothing in here that says where those parking places are. And so that would make a big difference, obviously, I think, where they're actually located in town.
Yeah, and we do know that that Buttermilk has expressed no interest in giving up parking because they want to make sure they have enough parking for their other two buildings if those come to be. So,
Sure. But
we'd
there's
have
nothing.
to have a way to find out. It's not just, I think in this case, it's not just the cost of developing the parking spaces and maintaining them, but it's also their desire to have those parking spaces available for their future plans. So I don't know how you would put a price on that.
Well, I was thinking a little bit more broadly, in that I don't think there's anything in here now that would prevent Buttermilk from buying up parking places outside of Jolina Court and using them to get the increased density. Was the intent that this would only be for parking that was developed on the Jolina Court property?
Well, I don't know. What do you think? I mean, that was what I was thinking, but whether we would want to allow them to buy up other parking. I don't know if there's other parking available. So we could certainly specify that it had to be if we wanted on the Jolina Court lot, Buttermilk lot. And where on the lot, if we wanted to do that, we could do that to be even more specific. If we wanted to allow them to buy parking spaces, on the VYCC property, I don't know. We'd have to specify that we didn't want those. I mean, all of those things would have to be specified depending on what we want to do with that. If we
Yeah.
think that's feasible and if we think it, could be spelled out. I don't know. I don't have the answers. I only put it in there because it was suggested. So,
Well, I mean, Mark should really address this, it seems like, so.
yeah,
Mark?
that'd be good.
Hey there.
Regina,
Yeah, wait a second. So Allison had a hand up here, so you
Sure,
can't
of
see her.
course.
Then Mark after Allison.
It's a little challenging for me to look at those numbers without looking at a map of just where that would go. In terms of how much space would that take up as against how much space is actually there and unused. I mean, that's hard for me to evaluate, 4 spaces or this,
Right.
whatever, when maybe they're all jammed together. I mean, and I don't,
Well, they have approval for 176 parking spaces, I think,
they do.
in
Oh,
their
okay.
in their master plan. They had
Yeah.
parking. So for right now, they have plenty of parking.
Okay.
And it's, we'd have to specify if we wanted it somewhere in particular. Right now, they've, building 1, they try to have it near building 1, and building 2, they're going to try to have it near building 2.
Mhm.
But there's plenty of parking available. What they don't want is to give up this parking in case they have a 3rd and a 4th building that also needs parking, which was in their original plan. That was,
Mhm.
shown. They have approval for those 2 buildings, which are
Those 2 additional buildings.
approved as all commercial buildings right now.
I see. Oh, okay.
So it's valuable, it has value to them, and I don't really know how to assess that value to them.
I don't either.
So, and because I couldn't find any examples of it in other zoning ordinances, I don't really know how to deal with it. So, Mark,
Yes.
yes, you're on the stage.
What are you thinking? What are you looking for from me? Because I kind of like what you have here. I'm wondering if the ratio between leased parking versus true town public parking that isn't taxable or whatever, for whatever that's worth. Those numbers make sense. Having a 1 to 2 and a 1 to 4 on the residential low income, moderately controlled low income, where you have 4 to 1 for truly controlled and 2 to 1. I think those are reasonable options for the entire town. Benefits, perks for improving, promoting additional development. So I like everything you've got there. What
So
we-
in terms of
we-
the parking, would you have it be just on the Buttermilk property? And would you have it be specified as to where it had to be on the Buttermilk property, or would you leave that up to the developer? Would you allow them to buy parking
call. I would
elsewhere
almost
off-site?
say that if not in the Buttermilk property, then in some sort of radius next, because I'm thinking about Railroad Street and down past the Richmond down past the Richmond market. If that's another property that's gonna go, it's not like we want to reinvent these density bonuses and tweak them per property. It's something that we kind of want to have in place that Buttermilk can take advantage of in their property, but other people would have application to it. So does it need to be on that property? Maybe, if it's in the village, it should be in the village.
So buttermilk.
Village, I don't know whether you draw a circle around the center of the property and say it's got to be within 500 yards of that, or I mean, honestly, I don't know. I haven't really given that a thought. I think somewhere in the downtown districts would be defined in the non-residential districts. If you could put parking, down there, then within the downtown village, there's only so much space. They don't want to use it there, or somebody else doesn't want to use that property, but they can buy another lot and add a couple of parking spots there for public access, then that would work.
So that would entail buttermilk actually spending money to buy a piece of property.
If that's worth it to them, or
Yes.
somebody else, yes. But ultimately, if they don't want it, they could just put it on their lot with all these other acreages. And who knows what's going to happen in 20 years. If your vision's right about everybody going to bicycles and mopeds, parking won't be a demand. Right now, it's a demand. I think it's something that should come to be encouraged to promote more of. Maybe we won't need it. We'll be able to put in more housing when nobody's driving cars anymore. But right now we're still driving cars, and so let's try to encourage some parking spaces now. I like the numbers that you had. Honestly, I think that's kind of reasonable. Maybe some sort of difference between leased versus true public. Have a different ratio for that. True public gets you, 2 parking spaces gets you a unit for public parking. Leased parking, 5 spaces gets you a unit. I'm hoping that they will say, okay, well, maybe we'll just take a couple of units and get some low income housing and add more market rate houses, and then maybe just do 5, 10 parking spaces with a gamble that nobody's going to want them in 15 years, in 10 years when they put in building number 3 or 4. You know what I mean? So I want to say I appreciate the deep dig you did on researching these other records and trying to find some sort of basis for these numbers. So thank you for that. I know that wasn't easy.
And so Mark, you would be fine if buttermilk took all of one kind of bonus and none of either of the other kinds of bonuses, right? So let's say they took the 4-to-1 bonus and for affordable housing, and they provided 3 or 4 affordable units and 12 market rate. They got 12 market rate units. You'd be fine with that, right? No
Sure,
parking.
sure. I mean, it would be great if we could,
the senior
but-
wasn't taken, but they provided something.
I think that would be appropriate for any development in the village area, that balance of whatever. If nobody does extra parking and they all go with low income housing or more affordable housing, then bonus for the housing. But I mean, clearly I think the select board too was sort of saying, okay, let's try to put something together that's going to give one of the many things that Richmond needs, including reduced water and sewer with more units. So that's a win, but nobody seems to be worried about the traffic. So, the numbers that we can go up to are, in that ballpark that the select board was talking about, 65, whatever that was, maybe 24 is, on 3 acres, 75. That's could be interesting. But if they can provide the affordable home, or affordable housing and possibly some parking to warrant that increase, then, they get to do what they want, and we'll just see how it impacts traffic, and maybe that'll make our decision about whether anything else ever goes in there.
And the other option for them would be to just take their 31 units and the removal of the commercial requirement and go with that.
Right.
So that would reduce the density, which would
I
make you
can't
happy.
imagine why they would. They're already at that point where they're saying they're providing, market affordable rated units. And if it's only for 15 years, which also seems like a reasonable number, because again, 15 years from now, we could be looking at a totally different thing than what we were looking at 15 years ago. So right now, crunch for housing. Hopefully they will find some benefits to a reasonable workforce housing rate that they dedicate for 15 years and see where it goes.
And you'd be okay with the affordable housing for 15 years.
Yeah, because I think again that short of as you have dug up with all the information and research you guys have done, that it's just not practical long term. Even short term is going to be a burden on the town, but long term it's only going to really be practical unless we have independent land owned from a NGO that owns the land outright and can manage the property as a true subsidized housing. That's not this property. Maybe that'll be on the back of Railroad Street or something, hopefully an expansion of that or something. If we make it encouraging to do so, I think we're on the right track.
Chris hasn't.
Okay, Chris.
Yeah, just pointing out, so the draft language does have in perpetuity. I would not hold out for that necessarily, but 15 seems a little short to me also. I think that when we talk about the parking as an option, it sounds, Mark, correct me if I'm interpreting what you just said incorrectly, but it sounds like you would be willing to see 45 units go in there with no increase in parking over what would be required for the 31.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as long if they're offsetting it and achieving that number with affordable housing, then that's a win for the town too.
But what if they're not doing it through affordable housing? What if they're doing it through having these only through these senior accessible units?
Then that's a win for the community too. I mean, that'll be better for the seniors, which we're lacking a lot of. As long as there's something there that's going to promote some of the many things that the community and we have been talking about wanting in or thinking that the town's in need of.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think we all are generally, I hope, and now in agreement with that general idea. I don't want to speak for anybody here. In specifics, I think that I don't personally have a problem with Buttermilk purchasing parking areas to comply with the parking aspect of the density bonus that are off-site of the Jolina court property, though I think that the point's been made and I agree with it that they should be within the village area just because that's where they're needed. But to the extent that that parking exists that is being underutilized now, I'm thinking offhand for maybe at Harrington's, there may be parking there that they would be willing to sell to Buttermilk. It would be more efficient use of existing parking space in town, which I think is probably a good thing all around. And then other than that, it's just making it something that we can really administer. Leasing makes me a little nervous just because a lease is signed one day, then the building is built, and then the day after everybody moves in, the lease is up, and what's to compel them to lease more sites? There's basically no carrot or stick there. So I would like to see for the parking density bonus that the Buttermilk owns the additional parking spots in question.
That who owns it?
Buttermilk, or
Well,
Or what if they gave it to the
I
town?
mean, they're gonna be leased to the town, or
well,
they're
if
gonna
they gave it to,
dedicated to the town.
I don't want Buttermilk to lease it from somebody else, I guess what I'm saying.
No, this would be that Buttermilk would develop it and would lease it to somebody else.
Okay, but if it wasn't so much of a developing, but a purchasing of already existing private parking, if you see what I'm saying?
Well, if they purchased it, then it would be Buttermilk's, and then they could lease it to somebody else if they wished. But Buttermilk would own the parking in
Yes,
either case,
yes.
either the
Okay.
public or the leased. Yeah, and the reason that came up really was because Gabe Berman was interested in leasing some parking
Oh, really? Okay.
from them for the,
But this
the
building
big
has
screws for his two restaurants and the hatchet. So, and the Richmond Community Kitchen might be interested in leasing some parking, for instance.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe. We don't know about that, but anyway,
So it's just,
it
where
would
do
just
we
be some
draw that?
other village business that's interested in having its own parking at the Buttermilk site.
So I guess then the question is where do we draw the circle of where that additional Buttermilk owned parking could be? If people are comfortable with it being off-site of Jolina Court.
Right, within the village.
Have
And
to
I mean,
probably, no matter what, we'd probably want to define the districts in the village and identify them, omit the residential south, omit the residential north. But any of those other middling districts, if you can get parking anywhere in there for the public, then that'll be used. Nobody's gonna need it out in the AR. I mean, we could start splitting hairs over some of the public amenities along the Huntington River and whatever, but I mean, that's just making it too complicated, I think, for what we're trying to do right now. I think define the districts in the village, say this is where the parking has to be.
mhm.
And honestly, I think they're going to have a ton of room on the Jolina Court for a bit. And
Well, they are right now. It's just, I mean, that's kind of.
then they
There's gonna
can
be
move
plenty
it,
of parking right now. They just don't want to lose it for the future.
right? Well, if the use of cars and the demand goes down and it's not a mess wrecking the traffic on Bridge Street, then we can dial that back and remove the requirement for the parking for everything, for everybody who might have it, if it turns out that it's just not a requirement anymore. But short term, the next 10 years, I think it'll be a demand. I think they're going to have the room to do it, because how long is it going to take for them to build this property and fill it
Yeah,
out?
well, it's going to be 10 years before they get to buildings 3 and 4. If they ever get there,
Yeah.
it'll be 10
By
years.
then, we'll have a much better feel on just how much farther we should go with allowing development in there, commercial or residential.
Yep. The other thing that we have to do with this, if we're going to pursue the parking thing, we have to talk to Pete, like, how is this going to work with the plowing and all that? Is it feasible from an administrative point of view? I think there are lots of unanswered questions about whether, if the town, if they're dedicated spots to the town, is the town going to be able to deal with that and manage it? Do they want to? Do they hate the idea? I mean, I don't know. We haven't talked at all to the road people about it, who take care of the roads in the winter in particular. So,
Well, whether it's for public or leased, I would proffer that that the owner or the is maintaining the parking spaces. So they're going through the effort of plowing it in the winter. They're making sure that those public spaces are out there as either part of a lease or as part of a public accessibility. That's on their shoulders. All the more reason to keep it together with all the other parking than it is to put it off in some far-flung corner of Railroad Street. But some far-flung corner of Railroad Street still wouldn't be the worst thing to have, because everywhere in downtown it's a problem.
okay. All right. So, yeah, well, we would just want to work out how it was going to work from an administrative point of view, for sure. But, I mean, what I would be hoping tonight is that if people want to pursue all of these things, then we can go ahead and do more research. We can look a little bit, if you want, at the senior adaptable, which is not quite as inexpensive, I think, maybe, as you think, Chris. But so in the packet is the 16.7 senior adaptable housing development standards. And it could be all incorporated into the density bonus scheme, but I put it on a separate page just for ease of looking at it. So the senior units that I talked to these people at Cathedral Square about,
No, I see.
they meet the requirements established by the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standards, the UFAS, apparently, to comfortably and safely house those with physical limitations, including elderly adults. So, in order to be considered senior/adaptable under the Richmond zoning regulations, certain features shall be accessible. And the definition of accessible means that you can use a wheelchair to use them. So we're going to say that certain features have to be accessible, but others only have to be adaptable, which means they are convert easily to being accessible. So, and there's so many regulations around this, you would not believe, in the federal, especially, regulations. But so adaptable, for instance, means that you have doors and stuff around the base of a basin in the bathroom, the wash basin. But the plumbing is arranged such that you could get a wheelchair under there if you took the doors and the front of the cabinet away. So that's the kind of example of something that's adaptable. It is, in its most expensive feature, namely the plumbing, the arrangement of the plumbing, it's accessible, but not everybody wants to look at the plumbing. So you have a set of cabinets that are put on in a way that they can easily be removed. That is what makes them into being adaptable. So, in terms of features that are adaptable, for it to be adaptable, one of the requirements is the consumer has to be provided with information as to how to convert it from having cabinets around the wash basin to having plumbing that is accessible from a wheelchair. So anyway, under the accessible categories, there have to be accessible features to the site of the building. So you have to have a sidewalk that goes from, and we would have to put this in there, that goes from the unit, the building that you can get in and out of easily, to the nearest sidewalk network or road network. And you have to have outdoor lighting that is adequate. Then in the unit well, then so that's the site. Then there's the building, and I'm reading off this section that I put up for a rough draft of it. The building that contains the dwelling unit, at least one entrance must be accessible. That means no threshold, doors that open properly for accessibility by someone in a wheelchair, wide enough, obviously.
Mhm.
If it's above the ground floor, it has to be an elevator. There have to be minimal or no steps. And you're also supposed to have memory promoting wayfinding cues for those
Mhm.
who have memory issues. So that's the building that contains the dwelling unit. In the dwelling unit itself, the doorways and the hallways have to be wide enough. They have to be truly accessible. Low or no thresholds within the unit so that you could roll a wheelchair from one room to another. The halls have to be wide enough. The light switches have to be in reachable locations. So these are all things that are intrinsic to the initial construction of the building. They're not like the cabinets around the wash basin that you can take off or put on. Loop or levered door handles, a bathroom that's big enough to have an ADA turning radius, which is pretty big bathroom, and you're not going to get that in a 400 square foot apartment. Very unlikely.
Yeah.
It's not, as far as I could see, it's only recommended that you have a pocket door to the bathroom instead of a swinging door.
Ah,
So that if a person
Big fan.
falls against it and it's in its closed position, nobody could get in. So a pocket door is suggested. You should have a step-in shower in the bathroom. Grab bars that are installed near the toilet and in the shower, as well as the supports in the walls for them, for those bars. They have to be stronger walls. Under sink plumbing, peephole in the door at a regular and lower level, adequate wired in indoor lighting to provide good lighting everywhere, and then a system of kitchen counters and cabinet bases which do not preclude adjusting for height, so you can make them lower. That's another adaptable feature. Yeah. So then the features that may be adaptable rather than truly accessible, cabinets that can be removed, kitchen counters that may be lowered. You have to build in a way that you can lower them, and equipped so that a visual alarm system may be installed if needed. So that seems to me like a pretty good amount of work. It may not be as inexpensive as you might think to do that. So that's kind of why I went with the 2-to-1 ratio, Chris, is because it seemed like, I don't know, that's gonna take money to do
Yeah.
that.
that's a lot of stuff.
It's kind of a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
It is kind of a lot of stuff.
And I don't argue with any of it. It's all good, but.
Yeah, we're gonna need it, right?
So,
So,
yeah, it's a lot.
who is that?
Chris.
Oh, Chris, go ahead. Yes, Chris.
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm not saying it's not a lot of stuff, but I think the relevant question is really what's the incremental cost, and are there limits? And you identified one of them. I tend to agree with that also, that, you know, for the smallest units, it may not be possible to comply with this because of the ADA turning radius in the bathroom. I mean, I don't know enough about that specifically to know. I had an experience with a family member who was wheelchair bound, and we went through some of this at one point, but I don't remember what the exact numbers are. But there may be some percentage of the units that they want to build that this simply wouldn't be an option for, you know, so that's
Right.
something to take into account. But when I look at this list, you know, based on my limited direct residential construction experience, you know, I think of the things that would cost the most money. It's the pocket door, it's the plumbing under the sinks, and possibly the kitchen counters, depending on what that means, actually, you know, because I mean it's kind of vague. I mean, you could you could say that any kitchen counter that isn't bolted to the wall is adjustable if it's put on a cabinet of a different height. I don't know if that's what they, consider to be compliant or not. But the other things,
Well, the Uniform Federal Accessibility Standards has all that information,
okay, good.
but
So
it's like hundreds and hundreds of pages, so.
yeah, but again, it's the incremental cost, right? So doorways and hallways ADA width, don't they have to be ADA width anyway? Things like that.
In a certain number of units.
Yeah, loop or lever
certain
door
number of
door
units.
handles. Lever door handles are fashionable now. I think that you can consider that a default. Um, adequate wired indoor lighting, all that means is that they have to put a ceiling fixture in the room, which, the real low end new apartments aren't even doing that now. They're leaving it completely up to the tenants to do plug-in lighting. So there's some additional cost in there, but it's not, a lot of these things are, if you do them at the time of construction, the incremental cost is relatively small. Things like
Well, yeah,
where you put peephole doesn't really have any additional cost involved. But so, and again, these are all good things. I'm not arguing whether these are beneficial or not, Virginia. I'm just saying that I think if this is an option and you can get two market rate units for every one of these, why wouldn't you just do this?
okay, well, I think that we ought to cost it out, frankly. I mean, I don't know how inexpensive it is overall. I mean, I hear your experience, but so the other thing that there were a couple of other things that I got from talking to Alex Weinhagen, which was that the true affordable might not be that far out of reach for people who were already charging lower rents. Now, what would be difficult for them would be probably the income sensitivity piece if they were doing that themselves. Because mostly an affordable housing group would do that. So that's one thing. And the other thing that was interesting is that in their density bonus scheme, small size got you a density bonus in Heinsberg. If you made apartments or homes that were small size, of which they had numbers for, like the small size house was like 1,200 square feet.
Mhm.
And the small units were varied depending on the number of bedrooms, but and he did say that in his experience, anybody who used that found that they couldn't get that much rent for very small units anyway out here not in Burlington area. So they were almost meeting it. Oh, but they did have to do the income sensitive piece. So I don't know. I mean, we just probably need to get more information on all of these things. If people want to pursue all of them and go in this direction, saying we're going to take away the commercial, you only get a density bonus if you do one of these things, then we can work some more on these things. What do you think, Ian?
Ian, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Ian.
Thank you for your assistance. I think offering the three options is just fine. And if you got to a point where you had to eliminate and just offer one, I'd go with the affordable housing option, I think. I was wondering, I'm a little lost on the parking thing. So if they have to find parking spaces somewhere else in town, the idea is that they would have to buy those parking spaces?
Yeah,
And who are they buying them from?
Whoever owns them.
got unused parking that they're willing to sell.
So there's people in town that are looking to sell parking spaces?
Well, that's the question. You know,
Yeah.
I think we don't know that.
Maybe not really.
Yep.
In the example of Harrington's does have a little piece, some land that is not much used. So I don't know if they would ever consider selling that for parking
Right.
at all. It seems like a long shot to me, but you know, I mean, I was thinking more of them having it on their own property, frankly, but
Yep.
of Buttermilk having the parking on as part of their lot.
Yep.
I think in the short term, right now, they're going to have plenty of space to put in town parking, be it public, be it leased, that they can provide. And if push comes to shove and we still have incredible parking demands when they go for building 3, I mean, our zoning has incredible parking demands. Like, you know, theoretically, there won't be any cars. But if there are, and we have that demand, then, and they want to put in building 3, then maybe they need to investigate shopping around for it. But right now, in the short term, the town could theoretically get some very convenient downtown parking dedicated. I know they're already doing it anyways, and don't get me wrong, they're good
Yeah.
folks like that. They're allowing it,
Mm.
but I'd like to secure it, and
Yep.
then we'll have it. And if they want to build and the parking numbers come up that there just isn't enough space to squeeze in public parking on that property anymore, then they still have the option to go somewhere else in the village districts to apply that parking.
I think it would be worth asking the town. I think currently that I talked to Josh, or had a note back and forth with Josh Arneson briefly. He said he thinks they have 200 parking spots currently in town. And it would probably be good to know, like, if they have a goal of how many spots they'd like to have at some point, because
Okay, so I'll add that to the list of
Yeah.
the next steps. Is one is talking to the road people, Pete and so on, and maybe then talking to Josh or the select board about, you know, do they feel they need more parking spots, or I don't know if we can find out if there's anybody within the village radius who actually has property that they want to sell. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
right now, what the downtown block, they have no parking requirements. What they're required to do by the zoning is to have a parking plan where they have arranged with somebody that they can park there in their spot, or they've arranged with Pete, or it's very vague. It's like, all you have to do is you have a plan. And the reason was to save all the businesses in the village that don't have any parking, was to keep them there.
Mhm.
So all they have to do is they have to have a plan. So maybe their plan involves using either the public spaces or some of those spaces that other people might want to rent to them right now. I don't know. I would be interested to find out what the plans of those businesses actually, their parking plans, what they are,
Hmm.
and if they actually have them, in fact, or not.
Yep.
Hey, or they may not. I mean,
Do not.
the Big Spruce wants the plan to be that they lease some spaces from Buttermilk. They would like that to be their plan, and, you know, 5 years down the line, maybe they're still trying to work out their plan, but anyway. So more, is that, shall we find out those kinds of things? More information about parking? More information about the cost of these senior adaptable requirements. Maybe the Cathedral Square people would have some kind of estimate, because they are also involved, I think, in At Home. The SASH program, and At Home, making it possible for people to stay in their own homes. So they might have more information about the cost of that. The people like the 4-to-1 bonus? Does that seem like a reasonable bonus
For the true affordable housing?
for the true affordable housing?
Yeah, I think it's probably a good one. I'm more concerned about the senior housing one.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, at least the true affordable had some kind of a basis, somewhat.
Mhm, mhm.
But we would have to work out how it would be administrated and, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're not interested in true affordable housing. They've already made that abundantly clear. But it
They are
is
not.
something that's going to be applicable for other properties too. So I think we should keep it in there.
Yeah, and it's, because for 3 or 4 units, they get 14 units to
Yeah.
meet needs to 45. And if their rents are close to being affordable anyway, it seems like they might bite on that.
Mhm.
I don't know.
It would be great if they did. I didn't get that vibe from them previously, but they
Yeah,
would,
no, they've
you
said
know,
they don't want
any one of
anybody,
these is a win,
Okay,
but they
well,
want more density. So if
right?
they want a fairly easy way, if they can convince the bank to finance their building with this small number of affordable units, that they get an extra 15 total units. I don't know. It seemed kind of possible that they might bite. I don't know. Anyway,
Be happy to write an op-ed about the bank that's not willing to make a loan to a company because they want 3 affordable housing units.
That'll get them that'll get them.
all right. So if everybody's happy with proceeding along the lines of these 3 different kinds of density bonuses, anybody want to suggest any other kind of density bonuses, or we can just continue to work on these to get all the information we need? Is everybody good with that?
sounds good to me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, Allison. Okay, so we will continue to work on them. And
12.
move on to our next topic.
And I will bid you all a fond good night.
Bye.
Have a happy anniversary, Chris.
Thank you.
Enjoy. I didn't know. Hear that. Good. Congratulations. Enjoy.
Good night.
Night. Okay, so our other piece of business,
Excuse me.
Bob is here to help us with this, I see. Is to talk about the flood hazard situation district.
12.
So just checking in with the memo here to see what we changed from last time. Everybody knows the time pressure has been removed. The 3 Parks Committee has been granted an extension to after whenever we finish our work. The date unspecified as far as I understand it, but it's sometime after the Planning Commission finishes its work. So there's no pressure there, but we would, obviously like to get it done sooner rather than later. So the basic strategy is allowing non-conforming structures to be regulated entirely by the flood hazard overlay district, not by section 4.7 and 4.8. So we continue with that. And the idea is that non-conforming structures can be relocated, reconstructed, rebuilt within the floodway. So they can be moved around. So the playground could be put on the grassy knoll. The restroom could be put on the grassy knoll. The new draft allows for a category called incidental structures, which is small things like trash cans and picnic tables of less than 150 square feet to be exempt from permitting. And in a minute, we'll read some changes, a little bit of changes that Keith made to that. So this allows for your picnic tables, Mark, and your trash cans and your dog waste bins and so forth. I wanted to get that in there. And this draft also allows for non-conforming structures in the floodplain outside the floodway can be enlarged, but nothing can be enlarged within the floodway. Tyler has stated categorically he would not allow the restroom to be divided in half and each half moved around separately. So I think we can think that he's not going to approve that. The band shell could be moved. It could be reoriented. It may or may not be able to be made smaller, but it has to be a band shell. It can't be a pavilion. And a band shell is a thing that has a wall to reflect the sound properly. So Tyler has made that clear. A fence around the playground is probably going to be okay. Tyler's going to commit himself to this, but it would have to be within the close footprint of the playground structure. If the playground was going to have a structure, it would have to be close to the, and he's kind of unhappy about that because that's a new structure and we're not allowing new structures to be put into the floodway.
So
What
he's,
if we
on-
did?
He's on the fence.
I'm
What if,
sorry, Mark.
It's a bad idea
is
to
it?
put new structures in the floodway that are going to be damaged and cost maintenance. And Denise Barnard has told me that they do not wish to put new structures in. The Three Parks Committee does not wish to put new structures in the floodway.
Even if it's a pavilion with the restroom up there on the grassy knoll?
Yep.
And Denise said that.
Yeah, she said it in conversation. So
Oh.
it's not the committee, clearly, but
Yeah.
she says it doesn't make any sense to put new structures that are going to undergo any kind of a damage, And we can't make the language work with the relocation of non-conforming structures. With Tyler, we can't make the language work if it's not the same structure, which he has very clear definitions about. And the pavilion is not a band shell. That's what his position is. So we've also added a new definition called recreation path to the whole Richmond zoning regulation because there was not one in there. And in section 2.4.4, recreation paths are allowed in all districts. So we feel we need a definition for it. And it is well, you'll see when we read that over what we have recommended for it.
Mhm.
So that's the changes made since the last time we looked at this. We're calling this draft number 8. So any questions so far, or shall we just go ahead and look at these few changes that we've got going? Any hands up? No, I don't see any hands. I don't see any questions.
Okay, so
So we can go through the draft very quickly. You can see that 4.7, we're taking out the fact that non-conforming structures that are in the flood hazard overlay district, they have no regulations in this section. They're only regulated in the flood hazard section.
right, it's both structures and uses.
Both structures and uses. Okay. So that reduces any conflict between what we want to do in the flood hazard overlay district and the rest of the zoning ordinance, which regulates nonconformities by 4.7 and 4.8.
Mhm.
All right, so moving right along through the document.
Can I ask one question about the flood?
Yes,
Is there any momentum to redefine where the flood hazard districts are? Because we've had so many floods. I know some towns are doing that.
mhm.
And I'm just wondering, well, I suppose it's a moot question, but if the flood district moves
Mhm.
or is redefined,
Mhm.
then that's going to change some of these things for people. But I don't know that we have to worry about that right now,
Yeah.
but it just occurred to me. That's
Yeah,
all.
and I don't think that's up to us. You know, the FEMA
Yeah.
maps are in existence, and right now, everything that we do is based on those FEMA maps, and the FEMA maps are probably out of date, but we can't define them ourselves.
Yeah.
And that would be a select board issue if you wanted to take that to the select board and say, are you thinking about doing that? You know, I don't know if you know of these other towns, how they're doing it, if they're going outside of the FEMA structure or.
I don't
No.
either.
Yeah.
I just know that.
So
There's
it's,
been enough floods that people in different parts of the state have been talking about that.
yeah, and it may eventually, I mean, I'm sure the FEMA people will have to redo their maps at some point in time. Okay, so the next place we get to is in the definitions. We're not changing anything else about this flood hazard district. We're going down through the definitions until we add this definition, incidental structures. So this is to allow for the things like the trash cans and the picnic tables to be put in without having to get a permit. Structures 150 square feet or less in area that are incidental to a use. So not crucial to it, not,
You don't have the updated one.
oh, okay. You better read it.
Yep. So incidental structures 150 feet or less in area that are incidental and de minimis to a use.
And
such-
for all of you who aren't Latin scholars or legal scholars, de minimis
Not worthy of reflection.
means basically that you shouldn't have to consider them because they're so minor.
Correct.
So, and it is a term that is throughout legal language. It's kind of vague to me, but on the other hand, de minimis, everybody
Mhm.
likes to use it. So we're put in de minimis. It means they're very small and insignificant.
Thank you, Virginia.
You're welcome.
Such as refuse containers, picnic tables, dog waste bags and bins, poles, temporary tents or canopies, and here's the kicker, and other temporary structures not considered to increase the flood hazard. Again, no structures greater than 150 square feet in area shall be considered incidental. The 150 is basically based on a 12 by 12 tent, which is 144 square feet. And those are temporary structures that can be put up for the farmer's market or maybe a birthday party or something along those lines. We don't want to, have to come in and permit that every time. So does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
It does allow you to have more picnic tables. And if there's any structure that is not on this list that somebody thinks of that may not be considered by everyone to be incidental and de minimis, it will have to go to the DRB and they will have to
Right.
make a decision. Is
Right.
this de minimis or not?
Yeah, this does give the zoning administrator a little bit more latitude, not specifically not to worry about stuff like this. So, this is
Now-
also something, go ahead, Mark.
I was just gonna say, that would apply to any building that's 10 by 15?
No, it's temporary,
Oh,
temporary structures.
in an area incidental structures 150 square feet or less in the area that are incidental and de minimis to such use as refuse containers, whatever.
Right.
They're incidental to a use. So a building is never incidental to a use, would you say? Or no?
Nor would it be de minimis.
And it's not de minimis. A building would not be incidental or de minimis.
Correct. So this is within,
150 square foot restroom up on the knoll would not count.
correct.
Yeah, a restroom would never be considered incidental and de minimis to a use.
Okay, if the 3 Parks is there, then I'm there.
Yeah, and they're good with
It seems
just
to be.
taking one restroom, making it handicapped accessible and stainless steel or something and putting it on the grassy knoll. All right, so any more questions about that? Incidental use gets your picnic tables and trash cans taken care of.
Nice.
Bob, did you have any concerns about that? Or are you gonna talk a whole bunch at the end?
No, a whole bunch of
I have one comment later on about
Okay.
the DRB enabling language.
Okay, but none about that in particular.
Okay.
All right, So we go on and,
We removed the definition for minor accessory structures, and we're just gonna go with accessory structures.
yeah. So incidental structures are not accessory structures. There
Correct.
are no minor accessory structures, which might have been what was intended originally, but this definition comes out of like official language, I think. So we didn't want to get involved with it.
Right.
So we made up a new category. Then we come down to non-conforming structure or use. And we put them together because they both have the same requirements about them,
Correct.
whether it's a non-conforming structure or use. And there's sort of a bleed over between them in that some things Tyler considers to be structures containing non-conforming uses, like the playground, which seems like an arcane way of putting it. But anyway, we just put them all together, non-conforming structures or use. So it's one that was in existence before the date that this is going to be adopted, whatever it is, unless someone can prove that it was a violation when it was put in place. So you have to, the shoe is on that foot now, that you have to prove that it was in violation rather than you have to prove that it was not in violation.
Yeah, and it'll basically be a moot once this date gets installed there. Yeah, once this is approved. Because you're not allowed to have new structures, so.
Right.
Yep.
So it will have to be anything for that date. Okay, so then we move on. Everything else
Tear
is the
that.
same. Till we get to the table, the special flood hazard overlay district use standards table, which is not really a use table. It's more like an activity table.
Yes.
This bothers me, but this
It's
is what
all
we've
right.
got.
Well, it does say activity there, so.
Yeah, but up above it says the use
That's true.
standards. We took out new minor accessory structures because we took out the definition of minor accessories.
And installed,
And we installed incidental structures and we put them as being exempt. So they get the check mark,
they get the check mark.
which you're
exactly.
gonna have to show me how to get to. Anyway,
Mhm.
so that is consistent with what we've said in the definition and how we want them to be treated. And we got rid of the phrase from the previous time we looked at this, new recreation areas without structures, because we had no definition for that. And we can't really conceive of what they would be, except possibly a recreation path. All right, then we come down to this list, 6.8.10 through like 13,
Yep.
which is just the same as the table, only written in a list form.
Mhm.
And we just wanted to make sure the table and the lists were consistent with each other.
Right, which leads to this additions to minor structures that'll have to be a cross through. Along with new minor accessory structures, because we're only dealing with accessory structures at this point, so.
Mhm.
Just picked up on that.
Okay, and under exempt activities, we didn't go through those, we have added incidentals
Correct.
structures. So, yep, crossed out addition to minor accessory structures, new minor accessory structures.
What's an example of an incidental structure?
Picnic table
Oh, I see.
or
Like really?
dog waste station
Yeah. Okay.
Tents smaller than 150 square feet that are temporary.
and tents like the
Yeah,
farmer's
okay.
market.
All right.
So. Okay, all right.
Now you're into permitted.
So we're going down to. We crossed out new recreation areas without structures, because we've gotten rid of that, which has no definition. In any place that it appears, we've gotten rid of it, unless someone can actually think of what that is.
Gary's got his hand up.
Okay, yes, Gary.
Okay. So, it took me a while to figure out how to get my hand up, but so I'm back a little bit. Did you
Yeah.
say that there it is possible to put a bathroom up on the higher
Yes.
ground?
Yes, it is possible to move the bathroom, to relocate, because we've allowed for the relocation of structures within the floodway that are already existing, that are non-conforming. So the bathroom,
They'd have to remove that other one completely, right?
exactly.
Yep.
Tyler
And-
has assured us that he would never permit half the bathroom to be moved.
Right. So I happened to run into Keith and Tyler and walked with them a little bit today, and Tyler said that it would have to be the same size bathroom. Is what I heard. Is that what you heard, Keith?
Yeah, I think that's in flux. But yeah, he seemed to be pretty adamant that it has to be the same size. It can't be smaller.
Yeah, that would be a big bathroom to put up there with other things that
Yeah.
are happening up there.
I agree. I agree.
Why can't it be smaller?
That's his position at this point. Now, obviously, the
What
select
is
board.
it based on, though? Just
Hang on, Mark.
a thing?
This is well, welcome to my world.
Exactly.
The select board can make a decision on that also. So, we can change the language if need be to satisfy that. But at this point, I think it's in flux, and I don't want to speak for Tyler at all. He is the zoning administrator, and I think that conversation will continue. Let's
So
put it to you that way.
His
I
point,
hope so.
Mark, his point is, and Gary, that if you relocate something, it has to be the same thing in its new location.
Mhm.
So he's counting the footprint of it as being an essential part of its sameness. Now,
No,
Keith and
no, I
I
understand
argued
his
very
position.
strenuously with him that reducing it is a good thing.
Reduces the hazard, yes.
Because it reduces
Right.
the hazard. So why can not we have it so that the hazard is reduced?
We'll
So-
work through this.
Yeah, we're kind of working on this point because doesn't make sense that you couldn't make it smaller. And the three parks want a smaller bathroom, and they want, if there's any excess component that relates to its handicapped accessibleness,
Yeah.
they want that to fit within the existing footprint, but that would make the bathroom itself a little smaller. But so anyway, we are working on this because we also find that it doesn't make sense not to allow it
Yep,
to be smaller.
And I would add that when we do go to the public hearing, Tyler will be present to answer questions of that regard. So it's not going to be done in a vacuum.
Okay. So we hear you on that, and it's just a little bit of a problem. Okay, so the next changes occur to 6/8/15. This is the main thing really that we're changing. It's about non-conforming structures and uses.
This was fun.
So a few of the items under non-conforming structures and uses in the flood hazard overlay district shall be regulated entirely by 6.8.15. Well, that's new. That's where we've taken it away from 4.7 and 4.8. A few of the items we have brought in from 4.7 or 4.8 because they appear to be needed here as well now that we're not consulting 4.7 and 4.8. Such as a non-conforming structure or use may continue to exist unchanged indefinitely. In other words, they can leave the playground and the bathroom right where they are, and they can continue to,
Legal.
yep, it's legal. They can continue to be fixed up after every flooding event. So a non-conforming structure or a structure containing a non-conforming use may undergo normal repair and maintenance without a permit, providing that the non-conforming use is not changed, enlarged, expanded, moved, or altered. Now, here is where we wanted to put in, it's okay to make it smaller, but Tyler wasn't buying it right then. So we're working on that. Anyway, and Tyler's feeling is that you can do anything you want as long as it's not changed, enlarged, expanded, moved, or altered, you can tear it down and rebuild it exactly the same if you want with new materials. That's part of repair and maintenance.
Right.
Should that be a non-conforming structure rather than a use?
It's both.
A non-conforming structure or a structure.
It's talking about the size and repair. You don't repair a use, you repair a structure.
Well, it's a non-conforming structure or a structure containing a non-conforming use.
It's a clarifying statement.
So it's still all about the structure that you're going to repair, but the structure may be okay, but it's the use that's non-conforming in certain situations. That may be the case. So anyway.
Okay.
All right. C says basically, if you have a structure that's already been declared unsafe or a health hazard, you can't continue it indefinitely in that form because it's already a health hazard or unsafe. So that is not a kind of nonconformity that you can continue indefinitely.
Correct.
This does not give you the legal permission to continue something like that if it's already illegal. So I think, Gary, you had a question about that before, but that's what that means. I hope that is clear. Okay, then you get to D, which comes down to the DRB. This is with the conditional uses. After public notice and hearing, may approve replacement, restoration, reconstruction, or relocation of an existing non-conforming structure or a structure containing an existing non-conforming use in the flood hazard district. So we have added the word relocation to that list of things that you can do in order that you can move around a non-conforming structure. You can move it around within the floodway, which allows you to move the playground up onto the grassy knoll or the bathroom up onto the grassy knoll, because the grassy knoll is still in the floodway. So
Provided. Right.
provided.
Yeah, so they're in order to do that, you have to meet these provisions.
Provided that the following conditions hold, the degree of nonconformity is not increased, and there is no expansion or enlargement of the structure or the use if located in the floodway. So that lets Bob Heiser make his shed into something else if it's, because it's not in the floodway, it's in the floodplain. It's out of the floodway. This just says you cannot enlarge it or expand it if it's in the floodway.
Specifically in the floodway.
And this is where I have the question, if you want me to do it now, or you want me to wait?
Go ahead and do it right now.
So, and this is hearkening back to the intent of not changing unintentionally changing these regulations for residents in the floodplain.
Right.
And so the original DRB, which is right down below this, enabling language said that, and it did include relocation. The DRB, after public notice and hearing, may approve the repair, relocation, replacement, or enlargement of an existing. And so I was pointing out that people in the floodplain are losing that affirmative pathway to seek conditional approval from the DRB after a public hearing and or public notice and hearing. And the concern was enabling this stuff in the floodway and enlargement in the floodway. And so we talked about making that distinction. This distinction, I think, makes it clear that it's not allowed in the floodway, and you would need to intuit that that implies that it is allowed in the floodplain, even though it's not explicitly stated as it used to be. And so I would argue, let's just put that word back in to the DRB paragraph of what they're allowed to do after a notice and hearing. Say enlargement is one of those that they could entertain, and then this new language limits that in the flood, or does not allow that in the floodway. Otherwise, you have to do some mental leaps to say that they're enabled to do that in the floodplain. And mental leaps have not been popular in the interpretation of the zoning regulations.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
Well-
sorry, I didn't follow that.
So,
Sorry.
yeah, so Mark, he's just saying that he wants it to be specifically allowed expansion in the floodplain outside of the floodway.
So that expansion of structures in the floodplain is allowed as long as it's not a significant expansion.
Well, it's just of a nonconformity. You can expand it or enlarge it if it's not in the floodway.
Just the way it used to be is what I'm.
Yeah, I think that's what we used to say, isn't it?
Yeah, if you look at the, it's now on page 17, the crossed out language in the special provisions regarding non-conforming structures. So that crossed out language, it used to
right
say in the
here.
middle of that paragraph, the second sentence in that paragraph, the DRB, after public notice and hearing per section 8.2, may approve the repair, relocation, replacement, or enlargement of non-conforming structures. And so that in the replacement of that language in the new language, enlargement was stripped out.
Because, let me add, because we felt that by definition, enlarging a structure in the floodway increased its nonconformity, i.e. its level of flood in hazard.
Right.
So
And
that's why we needed to take it out, because where it says flood hazard overlay district, it's both the floodway and the floodplain. And so that was allowing in the floodway there to be an enlargement, which we did not want to have.
and so with the new clarifying language of that, it's not allowed in the floodway, there's still not, I mean, you'd have to intuit from that somehow keeping the word enlarged in where it is currently would enable it in the floodplain, but not the floodway with the
Correct.
new language. But without enlargement where it is now, or where it is in the current zoning regulations, you'd have to make the mental jump that even though it doesn't say it, that the DRB is empowered to do this after a notice and hearing, because it says you can't do it in the floodway, it's suggesting that you can do it in the floodplain. And that seems unclear to me. And if that's your intention, I would argue you say it explicitly in the.
Don't we have that in the current language that allows a certain degree of enlargement of pre-existing structures?
Yeah, but Mark, so we're trying to take out the part that allows it in the floodway.
No, I get we're trying to dial things back as much as humanly possible, but I'm also arguing that maybe we don't need to dial it back as much as humanly possible. So certainly is that Bob, by the way? I can't tell. I didn't recognize you
Bob is here.
Yeah.
from
He's
this
been
far. I didn't hear your name announced at the beginning, but so
It's late.
Bob wants to go from a 8x10 shed to a 10x10 shed, which is, inconsequential in the flood plain,
Yes.
does not seem like a big deal. Or somebody wants to put on add a garage to their house that's in the flood way. I don't see, it's still their house. Yes, they're in the floodplain. Yes, it's not great, but they're there. It's their home. That's where they are. And to draw back and eliminate any improvements on any properties seems, I don't know. I don't know. Could have sworn when we did this a while ago, and maybe Gary can speak to this because I think he was on the commission when we were talking about this. I'm sure he was certainly involved, and he's well
We're
dialed
on
in.
the same page, Mark.
Yeah.
We also believe that Bob should be able to enlarge his house in the floodplain.
Okay.
Can do it. It's just the language. He feels it's not clear enough.
You
We
can't,
felt it was perfectly clear.
regardless, you can't increase the nonconformity in either. That's a given. Okay.
Is it a given? Is it a mandate in the FEMA
Language.
regs, or is it a idea that we have
Well, if that's the
interpreting our current zoning regulations? Is it an idea
It says right here, a non-conforming
Yes, or is-
structure or structure containing a non-conforming use may undergo normal repair and maintenance without a permit, providing that the non-conforming use is not changed, enlarged, expanded, moved, or altered.
So that's the new language.
That's the new language, right? That's the important point here is what is it we have to do and what is it we want to do. And,
the degree of non- oh, sorry.
and I think we have different opinions of what we want, but I think what we need to worry about is what we have to do. And if we have to do it, and we've currently allowed that option to put a garage on a home that's in the floodway or rebuild the shed so that it's, and I thought there was like a percentage degree, there's like a limitation. It's not like you can double the size of your house, but there's a certain percentage of increased, where is that language? I don't know if it's in the floodplain or just in general non-conforming use language where there's a certain percentage that you can't go beyond, but allowing some flexibility for people who are already in the situation they're in.
So in section 4.7 that we are no longer referring to, it says non-conforming structures may undergo normal repair and maintenance without a zoning permit, provided that the structure's degree of non-conformity is not increased.
And that's under the section governing structures that house a non-conforming use.
Yes. Well, it's under non-conforming structures. Let's see, under non-conforming uses.
It's just ridiculous.
4.8.2.
Well, I don't think it's ridiculous. Listen, I don't appreciate that. And
I apologize.
And
I apologize.
And the difference here is that I think the planning commission was asked to change things so that the town on its own property could have more flexibility in what it wants to do than the current regulations state. And you stated in a memo to the planning commission, and I assume the public, that the intent was not to change things, I would hope, in a direction of being harder on other residents in town who happen to also own land in the floodplain and the floodway. So we're trying to make things easier on the town's property, and I support that. And I think you've said you want to do that while not making it harder. I'm saying you've taken out something that was clearly a pathway for me. And if you can point to me, if you were a zoning administrator in 10 years, what the language would be that you would look to in the new language to say, I have a pathway to enlarge a structure in the floodplain, I think where you would point, if you can point me to another section, I think where you would point is it says that it's conditioned on that there's no expansion or enlargement of a structure in the floodway.
Exactly.
And so I am to a zoning administrator in the future who may be a very strict reader might say, well, that doesn't give you the authority to increase something in the floodplain. It's saying you can't increase something in the floodway. I'm saying if your intent is to enable it in the floodplain, why take out the word that enables it that is in the existing zoning regulations?
Well, we're
I
just,
apologize.
Thank you.
we're rewriting
The
it.
frustration's just getting to me.
So, you know, my solution would be to add in that sentence there, the degree of nonconformity is not increased and there is no expansion or enlargement of the structure or use if located within the floodway. However, those may be permitted or something in the floodplain. I mean, you can rewrite that paragraph that we've taken out by just saying expansion or enlargement is permitted in the floodplain, but not in the floodway.
With DRB approval.
With the DRB approval. It would come under.
Which is what the language was before.
Paragraph of the DRB approving it.
Right here.
Yeah, and that sentence no longer includes it. So if you don't want to put it back there in that sentence, but you want to put it somewhere else, I guess that's that could be fine without seeing the language. I don't know, but and I'm sorry to let my frustration show.
So good.
Yeah, so the point is that we don't want it in the floodway, but
right, and that's the point. It's not
okay
allowed in the floodway.
floodplain. So, you know, we can
Says by
continue
omission.
to rewrite that a little bit if you think that that's not clear. I felt it was perfectly clear myself, but maybe not so much.
Is there something about a percentage in that section 4, I think 4.6 you were referencing, Virginia?
No, Mark, I think you're talking about the substantial versus in the unsubstantial
Improvements.
So there's improvement, non-substantial, and there's improvement substantial. I think that's what you're talking about.
I think you're right.
Which is, if you reread the definitions, so improvement, substantial, and these are all taken from the NFIP language. It's all about the insurance.
Mhm.
The substantial
Right.
improvement business and the non-substantial improvement
It'll-
is NFIP business. So it's like 25% of the floor area, and, it doesn't really, Tyler especially is having very hard time applying this to non-residential structures or non-building structures. But that's what those things apply to.
Well,
Anyway.
I would say, we check with Tyler and see what it is that the language that he would require, because I think he takes an extremely strict interpretation, and I can't imagine running across someone else. Certainly in the years I've been on the commission, I haven't crossed anybody else who's taken a strict an interpretation to some of this. So if we can make it that Tyler's good with it,
Yeah, I think.
which was the general impetus of what was originally written, then if we can get it for him to be like, okay, I see what was originally written and what you had intended, and I need to have it say this to
Well, he would be
fulfill that
fine.
request. Then
I would be fine with saying that you can't enlarge it or expand it if located in the floodway, but you can in the floodplain. Because he's fine with the concept of it. 'Cause that was the
within,
concept
as
that we
long as
had
it's
already
not
in here.
substantial improvement, right? Because we're still tying into that. Because I don't want, somebody doubling the size of their house. It seems excessive. Those types of things. I don't think we intended to allow that, but we did want to provide some means for people who are willing to pay the added flood insurance to insure a larger property than if they're going to do that, and that's what they want to do, and it's within reason. I think
Bob's point was that the language that exists currently in this document is that the DRB may approve the repair, relocation, replacement, or enlargement of an existing non-conforming structure. That's what he would like this to clearly say.
I hear that. Yeah.
So it's not about whether it's substantial or non-substantial, or whether it's twice as big, or the DRB has to approve it. And, we assume that the DRB, in their wisdom, would make a good decision.
You're
Like,
right.
you're making your house 3 times bigger on Esplanade, and you're putting on another basement in the Esplanade.
It's probably not going to
Why?
happen.
Right.
But if they were really thinking about it and thinking, this is not a suitable place for doing this because of the flooding concerns, that's the DRB has some discretion here.
Okay.
So
I'd love to hear Gary's recollection of this and his
hand is
perspective.
up. Is that Gary's
Yeah,
hand?
yeah.
up?
Ian is up.
Oh, Ian.
Gary's ahead of me.
Did he have his hand up?
Yeah, he does.
Okay. Okay, Gary, go ahead, speak.
Yeah, so my recollection is probably shaky of what happened, a dozen years ago. So, but I do agree with Bob. I think it'd be good to just keep the language that's in there and just not change it, except for saying that sentence, somehow saying that sentence is dealing just with the floodway or the floodplain, and then have your other sentence. Yeah, I agree that there's some implication, Virginia, I agree with Virginia, there's some implication that it is, the DRB could imply that that was the intent in the floodplain, but I think there's something in the ordinance somewhere that if uses aren't specifically allowed, then they're not to be interpreted in. I forget how it's worded, but so I think we do have to make it more specific than what is there already.
Well,
And I do
thought we
like-
did that. I thought we did that with if located within the floodway, but I do understand that you want to
Yeah.
have absolute clarification on that.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think there is a pretty good implication there, but I'm not sure that that would be interpreted that way by a strict zoning
So what we
administrator.
could do as a suggestion would be to have D in the new version read, the DRB, after public notice and hearing per section 8.2, may approve the replacement, restoration, reconstruction, relocation, or enlargement of an existing non-conforming structure or of a structure containing an existing non-conforming use within the part of the flood hazard district that is outside of the floodway. Then the
Yeah,
next
perfect.
statement could be E. The DRB, after public notice and hearing, blah, 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 may approve the replacement, restoration, reconstruction, or location, but not the enlargement of an existing non-conforming structure if it is located within the floodway.
Perfect.
How about that? So
That
we
sounds
really separate them completely with the same wordage, except one says you can't do it in the floodway, and one says you can do it in the part of the SFHA. We don't use the word floodplain because it's not really used, it's like outside the floodway. There should be a word for that.
Right.
And we're using floodplain as that word.
The
but
floodplain is the whole thing, right?
it would have to say outside of the floodway in the SFHA. So you have your existing sentence basically in one piece, and then you have the new sentence in the next piece.
I think that's good. Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's good.
Be all right with that? It would
Yep.
just repeat itself without
The words.
the word in the one part and make it specific.
Specifically stating outside the floodway.
That's great, Virginia.
Is that
Welcome.
all right? Okay, so
How
let's
exactly is the floodway determined?
the floodway is determined from the maps.
I see. Okay, all right.
And the
So
floodway
it's-
is where the water actually runs.
Yeah,
where it runs.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. So, and there are quite a lot of things that you cannot do in the floodway that you
Yes.
can do in the floodplain.
Sure.
So like all the people who live on Esplanade, who have homes there, can do things to them if they're existing for the regulations.
So I
Thank
think-
you. And the only other comment I have on this section is just on the fly, having heard earlier conversations, and I don't need an answer on this at all, but just an idea of the item number B, in my mind, pertains to things that can be done without a permit. So reducing the size of something might be changing it. So I was thinking that D might be a place to put reduction in size that gives latitude for the DRB to consider a change like reduction in size that would be consistent.
So we could add
Expansion or reduction
expanded or
or reduce.
shrunk
Yeah.
or reduced in size to both D and the new E.
Say reduce the nonconformity. Something along those lines. To work
Well,
through that.
I would really put reduced in size
Mhm.
because, reducing the nonconformity may not always be thought
And go,
the
no more
first
permit.
thing that the degree of nonconformity has to do with the flood hazard itself. And reducing in size is a black and white thing. It either is reduced in size or it isn't. Reducing the degree of nonconformity of the degree of flood hazard, some people might want you to study that. You know what I mean? Whereas reducing in size, you don't have to study it. You don't have to know anything about it. You can reduce it in size. Is there any way that reducing something in size is going to increase the flood hazard?
No, but obviously, potentially relocating it could, but yes, no, I would agree with you on that. And logically.
Right.
But to be clear, that would be for something in front of the DRB. That wouldn't be just a
Right.
permitted action to do. So you would have 5 vested community members at least
Yeah.
putting some sort of perspective on degree of nonconformity.
So how would you write that? Without a permit, maintenance may undergo normal repair and maintenance without you still would want a permit if you're going to take a non-conforming structure and change it or reduce it in size, because that's a change.
I think it would have to go to the DRB.
Yeah.
I think it would have to be in the list with replacement, restoration, reconstruction,
Would
relocation,
not be in B.
enlargement, or reduction in size in the
So you
floodplain.
put that in D,
And then the same thing in the
In E.
floodway,
in E.
in E, exactly.
Okay, so D and E, add that to it.
Right.
Nice.
So if we go, and I'm just spitballing here, folks, if we install this language, or you guys are okay with us installing these changes, would you be amenable to setting the public hearing tonight? And then continue that discussion during the public hearing with those changes, or would you rather see the changes and then make the public hearing?
I think with the time sensitivity of things, as much as it may backfire, depending on the hearing feedback, I would be okay with making the language as we've described tonight and bringing to the people, hoping that it's going to fly and be good as is, or with minor changes, and see what the community says, and do a bit good reach out. But then that would move things along quickly, which I know the 3 parks, and I imagine even though the select board would appreciate moving this along.
I think we're sensitive to that too, Mark, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And I did put a draft motion for October 16th because we can't meet that 30-day deadline from this point forward to our first meeting in October, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
So to do it now would actually get the clock ticking a little quicker.
We have a
Yes.
few other things to go over.
We do have a few other things, though, but I was just throwing that out there and just spitballing there. Okay.
Okay. So, the next thing that we contemplated was going over to page 20, and it's number F. On page 20, we had thought that there might be a problem about existing non-residential structures to be substantially improved or replaced, and all additions be dry flood-proof, but that turned out to be okay.
Right.
So there's not a problem there. So I think we're good
Right,
there.
right.
That was just a kind of an internal.
We had to
thing
work through
about the
that.
problem. So then we go on over more pages of all the same until we get to the last item was the definition of a recreation path.
Which is in 7.
And the reason that it's in 7, so it's for the whole document. The reason that we are interested in this is because section 2.4.4 says in any district, you can have a recreation path. So that means in this district that we're working on, you can have a recreation path by 2.4.4. So we wanted to know what that is. What is a recreation path? So we made up this definition, which is a non-paved, and this is something that's permitted by right in all districts. So you want to make sure that it's only okay in all districts without a permit. So it's non-paved path of 4 feet or less that is designed for pedestrian use has been improved only by the removal of vegetation. It may also be called a footpath. In other words, it's just a natural path, like the path by the river, where you've just taken away the vegetation. There's no gravel, there's no pavement. There's nothing that has been changed. Any path that is paved or is gravelled shall be considered an on-ground improvement. So it does not fall under 2.4.4. It falls under an on-ground improvement. So
And it's a structure.
it doesn't allow for a paved path to be put as a recreation path in the floodway.
Well, that's going to be a hot topic.
Yes, it will be a hot topic, perhaps, but a paved path is a structure or an on-ground improvement, which will have to be maintained and it will have to be repaired when it's damaged by the flooding. So this is possibly not a suitable place to be adding such things that are going to be eroded away, and they will have to be plowed, they will have to be maintained, they will have to be fixed up after flooding. But you can put a path like the path that's there now, which is just a dirt path, basically. And I am not in favor of paved paths for access purposes, but this is not a good place to have a paved path added to the floodplain. It would be considered a new structure.
I think that's probably right. I was thinking also that there might be certain circumstances when there'd be a path that if the flood wasn't too bad, if it was paved, it would survive. And if it wasn't paved, it wouldn't survive. But it's hard to make a regulation based on a whole bunch of questions like that.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
driveways and parking areas are already exempted
Yeah, okay.
in the
yeah.
floodway. They are paved and they have the good and the bad that you just described in that they don't
Right.
wash away. But on the other hand, when they have to be repaired,
Costs money.
they have to be repaired and it costs a good amount of money to put that paving back. So it's, I don't know, we didn't think it was wise to make that okay in this district. And we also made a minor change in this above, but we had talked about this before for a recreation facility because the whole park is considered a recreation facility. It's an establishment greater than 5,000 square feet in size. And we took that out because there are likely to be recreation facilities that are smaller and there was no allowance being made for
Right.
those. So it's just any establishment that is designed and equipped for conduct of sports or leisure time activities.
Yeah.
They can be indoors or outdoors. So the park counts. But if you had a pocket park, less than 5,000 square feet, that would be fine. So
Mhm.
that's just a change that is like clearing up.
Is recreation facility specifically defined in this flood hazard overlay district, or reference to, I should say?
Nope, the definition is used by default from the section 7. If you need it, but it isn't really needed
It's not allowable use.
per se, because it's not an allowable use. It's only a non-conforming use that pre-existed the regulations. So if somebody wanted to say, well, what is it? What is the park? You know, what's the definition of its use? Its use is a recreation facility, but it doesn't really appear in the document because it's not a use that's listed in the use table because it's not an allowed use.
It is in other districts, but
Yeah, in many other districts, it's an allowed use, like our neighborhoods. Although the neighborhoods, I think, only have outdoor districts. Anyway. So,
So we know what we need to do.
Bob, did you have something else to say about incidental structures? Did you have a point about them that you wanted to make?
I think you're all right.
You're okay with the table and the dog waste stations?
Yeah, I didn't have a point about that.
As long as they're not like right next to your house. So-
No,
Yeah.
I don't know if I had suggested I had a problem with that, but I don't know.
I don't think you did.
Okay, all right. So are you good with this document, do you think? With that change that we talked about?
Yeah, that, I would appreciate some change to keep that ability for landowners in the flood.
To clarify that ability. Yeah, absolutely.
So do you have any other, since you are probably the person out there in the world, except maybe Gary, who has most looked at this document? Have any other public comment about it?
I don't have any other public comment at this time.
It's a lot of light reading there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question? Where is your house?
I live on Esplanade.
Oh, okay, all right, yeah.
He's in the thick of it.
When's the last time you had a substantial flood damage there?
We have been lucky not to have substantial damage. We've been flooded in the last in the basement in the last 3 floods, but we don't have a lot of important stuff down there other than our mechanicals, which we're applying for a grant to hopefully move out of there.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Ian, do you have anything to say about this document?
It looks pretty good with the changes that you made here tonight, I think.
Okay, Allison, how about you?
I think it shows that there's been a lot of genuine thinking, a lot of discussion and effort. It's hard to make something like this perfect for every situation. It really is. And I compliment you on the effort. And I think that I think it's okay.
Okay.
And we may learn by experience that
Right,
needs to change. Nobody's fault. Just,
right.
I think you did a lot of work on it.
Not adding stuff
Yeah.
to the volunteers green
Yeah. I think
in general.
we have, I've tried to make it sort of a humorous comment, but I've said for a long time that God's owned Richmond. What do we have? We have the river in the floodplain and some areas that flood a little bit and steep slopes. And that's what we've got. The change in weather that we've had, especially the past couple of years,
This is climate change.
has created, it's created a lot of different circumstances that we didn't used to have.
Yep.
And so people who are living in places that have these hazards that keep coming up, it's not a result of their bad planning or anything like
Right.
that. It's just
Change is happening.
stuff beyond your control.
The weather.
I live up on on Huntington Road, I mean, fairly high up, and my basement floods. The old Bates farmhouse. Luckily, my father really saved the building. My father was a highway engineer. He worked for the state highway department, and he actually supervised the construction of the entire Vermont interstate highway system. And when he found out, first of all, when I wanted to live in that house, he said, "Oh, why do you want that old white elephant?" But then when he found out that I did want the old white elephant, he was down cellar. We organized the neighborhood and dug out the cellar and all this and that. He designed a concrete basement floor that drained towards the center on both sides of the building. And it had little knee walls that connected to the old stone foundation. So it really, made a huge difference. But this summer, I've had to go down in the basement probably 3 or 4 times and start that sump pump. I mean, it's a blessing that it's there.
Yeah, well,
But that house was built in, the oldest part of it that's there now, was built in 1820.
yeah. Yeah, well, my animal hospital used to flood. The basement flooded every time it rained. It was just the water that ran off. And they just fixed it by having a stone foundation. The water flowed in and then you
Yeah.
got it out the other side.
Yeah.
We didn't put anything down there and it was
Yeah.
fine.
You know, I feel,
But anyway,
as I've seen people who are living downhill having such a struggle, I feel bad for them. And even though I have this little challenge that takes time, but I can push a button and the water goes out.
Yeah.
So I don't know, I have a lot of personal concern and sympathy for the people that have lived in the downtown areas that have flooded. I just, who would have known?
yeah, I mean, I have that sympathy also. And I also, every time I drive by the park when it's all fixed up, I think this is such a beautiful little park.
You know, many,
I love the playground where it is.
Yeah.
I love the grassy
Yeah.
knoll with the crab apples that are so beautiful in the
Yes,
spring. You know, I really
yes.
don't want to change a thing about it. It's so perfect. And then you have the flooding and it's so wrecked. And you think, what is the right answer? There's no right answer because it's a beautiful little
Jekyll and Hyde area. I mean, it's just.
deal. I know, but it's sad.
Yeah, it is.
So, but anyway, all right. So does someone want to make this motion that, did you put in the part about that we made some changes today? Or,
To facilitate yeah, I mean, we can do that,
What does it say?
as,
we set the public hearing to
and we could,
draft 8, reference draft 8 with the changes that were made at this meeting to be reviewed.
yes,
You put that in there,
I did not put that in here.
if you could.
I can't.
Great.
It's gonna have to be done on the fly.
Okay.
It-
So if someone would like to make a motion that we set the date of October 17th. Is that what that says?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that with the caveat of the changes tonight.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
perfect.
just want to state beforehand that I'm not terribly satisfied with the limitation of the changes we've made tonight.
Mhm.
I think differently. But I think our goal here is satisfying the 3 parks committee's desires to accomplish what they want to accomplish and the town. And you know, it's not a time to be talking about the floodplain with a freak number of flood events in the last couple of years. You know, so I think there's a lot of perspective is influenced by the recent events. That's just the way everybody thinks, because that's the way it is. And we don't know enough to know whether it's really going to get that much worse or going to get that better. I remember droughts in Richmond. Doesn't seem that long ago. Whatever. The short
climate
story
change
is we
data.
got to get this through so that we can get some things accomplished that the 3 parks committee has invested a tremendous amount of time, and hopefully we will invest a good bit of ARPA money in accomplishing. So on that note, I would like to say that as per 24 VSA section 4384 subpart E, I move that the planning commission set the public hearing for October 16, 2024 to facilitate the revisions of the following amendments, including the ones as discussed tonight. And section 4.7 non-conforming structures, 4.8 non-conforming uses, 6.8 flood hazard overlay district, and section 7 definitions. As of this date, September 4th, 2024.
Perfect.
I'll
Is there
second
a
that.
second?
And I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Ian and Allison. So
Oh, Ian can have it. It's all right.
That's
will get-
encouraging.
Ian, all right, is there any further discussion on this motion? Okay, so we will now vote. Allison, what's your vote?
Vote favor. Yes.
Okay, Allison votes yes. How about you, Ian?
Yes.
Mark?
Aye.
Mark votes aye, and I vote aye. So the motion is approved to have a public hearing on that date of October 17th. And by the way, the select board's public hearing on the VRNs will be on October 7th.
Excellent.
Got those
Thank you
coming
for
up.
moving that along with them.
Yes. Great. All right. Well, so we'll work some more on the buttermilk questions. We'll write these little changes into this document and send you all a finished copy of it. And have the public hearing. We'll communicate with the Three Parks Committee, I think, to tell them we're hoping that they would come to our meeting, but they did not. So we will communicate with them. So great. Thank you all very much.
They're having a meeting next on the 12th.
Okay.
So I'll be attending that, letting them know
Okay.
what we're up to and whatever. If anything crazy comes up, if there's any way I could ask for a draft with the revisions as said, maybe a strike through copy. I know it's a little pressing, but if I could get that before the 12th, I
Sure.
can, and actually, if we could forward that to the entire committee, the Three Parks Committee, that would be huge, just so that they can see that and we can talk about it on the 12th, make sure it's in line with what their thoughts are. And then, if things blow up and they're like, oh, we can maybe revisit this in the next September meeting and reschedule a hearing if it's so egregious that there's changes that would most likely need to be made. Then we'll have that time in a couple weeks to do that. And if not, then our hearing in October should be fairly clean. Now that's our second hearing in October, right?
Right. We don't have time
Second-
to get to the first our first October meeting. We don't have time to
Right.
do all the warnings and the notifications and stuff.
Understood. But it could blow up so bad on the 12th that we may want to think about rescinding our hearing or, understanding, at least being prepared for it, that it may not fly. And so we can talk about that in the next couple meetings before the October 16th hearing and make any decisions need be based on feedback.
Mark, can I just send this to the chair of that committee? Who is the chair, or should I send it to all the
Denise
members?
is technically the chair, but I think it would be best if it's sent out to everybody, that everybody's got a good voice and an idea of what's going on. It's a great committee. They're
Is
really,
that Three Parks Committee, is that on in the town? All the members?
it is. All the members are listed on the town website, Three Parks Committee Commission. So they should have
I'll send it
contact
to all the
information, I
people.
think, for all of them.
Yep.
But whatever you don't, if you can copy me on it too. And then I'll be able to make sure that everybody on the committee
Well,
is.
we're gonna send it
is
out to
looped
the
in.
members of the planning commission first
Oh.
with revisions, so you'll get it first and then we'll get it to the other people.
Well, if it's the revisions that are going to be the revisions, we might as well do both committees at the same time, right? Because what's
Okay.
the harm of,
Do that.
because whatever. If it's pretty much locked down at this point with the new revisions that you're sending to the planning commission, we might as well lock it
Yep.
down for them too, so that they know exactly what they're looking at.
Right. Yep.
Great.
And they have been waiting for us to tell them what they can do, so.
Yes, indeed.
So anyway, all right. So unless there's any further business, somebody could make a motion to adjourn. It's 9:25.
So moved.
Allison moves to adjourn at 9:25. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mark is seconding.
I just
Are
want to
you-
say it was really nice having these extra 25 minutes to close things out.
Yeah,
And
wasn't it
sometimes
great?
that's the thing that needs to be done in this committee. And
Yes.
I know it's kind of a drag sometimes, but
Preaching to the
sometimes when you're on a roll, it's worth running a little bit longer than having to start all over again 2 weeks
Totally,
later.
yeah,
So,
totally agree. Yep.
so
totally
I personally am putting it out there that should circumstances arise where we're on a similar groove, that we go past. And if not everybody can stay on, it's understood, but if we can maintain a majority at least, I think sometimes it's worth that extra time. It
Yep,
pays off in
well-
the long run.
with our small number of members. Only
Yeah.
one person can
No
leave.
room, there's no room
Only
for,
one person can leave.
I know the
and-
motion's been made, but has anybody heard about any other interested parties? I know the rec committee hasn't seen any applications.
same here, same with the transportation
Nope.
committee. There's,
Yeah.
they're just, but summer is over.
Summer, yeah.
Yeah, we'll
Hopefully,
get back to work, we hope.
yeah. Okay,
Yeah, my pool is cold.
Yeah, summer's
Yeah.
over, yeah.
It's not fun now.
Great, well, thank you all, and Bob, thank you for
Yeah,
your
thank you.
particular attention.
Did we vote?
Yep, what?
Okay, we voted? All right,
Yep.
good.
Yes, there were no objections. I asked for objections. There were no objections.
Excellent, awesome. Good night, everyone.
And Bob
Yes.
voted as well, so we even had an extra vote. And Jared voted as well.
Good night.
Good
Bye-bye.
night, everybody. Thank you very
Good
much.
night.
Good night, everyone.